Welcome to a new kind of truth. This podcast will broadcast a new gospel that will feel like church, where the pews are filled with the hues of the human condition. Folks searching for something, because we all going through a similar kind of something, all of us looking for a message, so no need to sit in the back. Come to the front, learn a lesson, get a blessing. You probably came to be entertained or hear the choir sing, but you're about to feel the thoughts of a purpose-driven woman. No sugarcoating, all truth, straight, no chaser, here to get down to the heart of the matter. So be prepared to peel back the layers, pour your wine, open up your mind, and let's unwind to the rantings of Dani.
All right. So it has been a minute. Welcome to the Rantings of Dani podcast. It is time to get back on this thing, between COVID and, leading a protest for healthcare for a while. It's been a while since I have been on the air and bringing to you topics and things that really matter to me, that I think are beneficial to the world and to people like me and people who aren't like me, because there's always something that connects us that we can use to understand each other just a little bit better. And so this broadcast is one of those. It's one of those that strikes me on a personal level, that I do believe there are hundreds, thousands, if not millions of other people, especially in this country, that can relate to this. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the balance of being biracial, especially as a child of the loving generation. Before I do that, make sure that if you are not subscribed to the Rantings of Dani podcast, that you do so. Make sure that you are following me on social media, on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, on all of those different platforms. So on Twitter, it is Real Dani Cook, and everywhere else, it is The Dani Cook. So make sure that you follow, subscribe, and keep up. Lots of things are going to be coming your way. Things that I am very, very passionate about: social justice issues, racial justice, women's reproductive rights. Not necessarily just equality, but equity for all people. The idea that we are only as free as the least of us. We are only as rich as the poor of us. We are only as well-fed, well-balanced, and loved as, the least in all of those categories. And so those things motivate me. They inspire me. They make me want to not do and be better, but do and be the best that I can for every day as who I am in that moment, if that makes sense, and hopefully it does. For those of you all who do not know, we are in the process of putting together a television show to be recorded in Atlanta, Georgia. We are looking for sponsors, corporate sponsors, individual sponsors, donations. You can go to thedanicookshow.com to get more information about that. There is a donate button with a very transparent breakdown of the cost of putting the show together, and we are looking to film that this fall, 2022. So hopefully you can be a part of that as well. Yes, you can even get tickets to be a part of the live studio audience. So now, all of that out of the way, let's start talking about the balance of being biracial. So I am 49 years old. And, I was a product of the loving generation, right? I can remember going to middle school and having the standardized tests where the only two options you had to describe yourself were white or black. And then eventually there was a box that just said other. So I don't know if you can remember those times, but I remember those times. And I remember, I'll give you a little bit of backstory. So my parents, if you've listened to 2 episodes of this podcast from back in 2018, you will know that my parents met while they were both in the Army and nursing school at Walter Reed Army Medical Center. They met in 1963, got married in 1964. And had my oldest sibling in 65, and then in 68, and then me in 73, right? My parents had to get married in Washington, D.C. Why? Because in 1964, it was not legal for my parents to marry. He was a black man. My dad was a black man who was from New York, originally from Georgia, and my mom was a white woman from the Midwest, from Iowa, right? So their options were not that vast. I was born and raised in Tennessee. They could not have been married in Tennessee at that time because it was illegal. And, my dad had 2 tours in Vietnam, and, he was medevaced home after one of those tours. He developed lung cancer, from being over there. There were everyone's familiar with Agent Orange, but there were lots of agent chemicals and things like that were sprayed over there. And so my dad actually died when I was 6 months old in 1973. And I have like 0 memories of him. And, imagine being my mom, being white, raising 3 biracial children in Northeast Tennessee in the early 70s. Tons of fun. No, not really. But that's what was on her plate to do. And, back then, if you think about it, long distance phone calls were incredibly important. The ability for a single mom, a widowed woman with 3 children to traipse up to New York and see my dad's family a whole lot was limited. So, I didn't get to see my dad's side of the family very, very much growing up as a young girl. And, while my mom did her best, because y'all, I can play spades, I can play bid whist, I can cook, right? I can season my food. I definitely know how to grease my hair. For those of y'all who are like, grease your hair, yeah, that's something that Black people do. That's what we call it. But there were things that she just simply could not teach me because she had not experienced them as a white woman. And when I was a little girl, I had no idea what those things are, what those things were, what they were going to be, what it was going to look like, how it would mold and shape me. And the reason this has all come to the forefront for me is because this past weekend, I got to go to New York with my oldest daughter and see my dad's siblings and my cousins and all kinds of people that literally I have seen a handful of times my whole life. And since my grandmother passed away, which was in the mid to late 80s, I was about 13, 14 years old when my grandmother passed. That was the last time that I went to New York with my mom. And that's only one of 3 times that I had visited New York since then. So think about that. I'm light skinned, but make no mistake about it. When you're where I'm from, which is Northeast Tennessee, where it's like 97% white, I very much experience this country and the world around me as a Black woman, right? And those were things I can remember being a little girl and my mother saying, "You're not either of those things. You're not Black, you're not white, you're just you." And it sounds good, right? It sounds good. I get what she was attempting to instill in me, this idea that I didn't have to conform or I didn't have to choose. And the reality was that by the time I got to be an adolescent, preteen, the world did make me choose. The world did, in fact, make me choose. I guess I started being called nigger in grade school by the age of 6, right? Fighting in school, straight A student, but fighting in school because you can't call me nigger, right? And I had to learn. So my mom and my dad were very adamant. My dad made my mom promise that my brothers and I would be raised to be articulate, that we would have a good vocabulary, that we would be able to enunciate and pronounce our words properly. And, there's this thing in the community that if you, quote unquote, speak well, somehow that's a white thing. So by the time I got to being a teen, I had to learn how to speak in certain environments and certain situations and things like that. And there were things that, it sounds so silly, but things as simple as big hoop earrings and things like that many people attribute to Black society and the Black experience or the ghetto experience either. Even those were things that weren't really looked upon favorably in my household. You know what I mean? There were things that are part of growing up as a Black girl, especially a Black girl in the city, that I did not have. And not growing up around my aunts and my cousins that looked like me or that were even darker than me, there were things that I simply didn't learn. So this past weekend, I got the opportunity to go with my oldest daughter to New York. And it was a ball of emotions. Now, we got to do some sightseeing and things like that. So like I saw Hamilton, which was just phenomenal. But even that ties into the balance of being biracial, because I'm sitting in Hamilton on Broadway, right? And it's this extremely diverse cast. And I'm filled with all of these emotions because I'm looking at men and women who look like me, who have lived like me, and they are living their best life. Like the idea that Black people are on Broadway in a hit show, just absolutely. And, so like the song, I'm not throwing away my shot, it just resonated with me because they didn't throw away their shot. They did whatever it took. They worked their tails off and they made it, right? To freaking Broadway. And I was just overwhelmed with emotion. But so in this whole experience, while I'm at home, and, my family in New York lives in the rough part of Brooklyn. And, but I was welcomed like with open arms. It was as if time had never passed and it was okay. But little things that happened that stuck out to me, that affected me, that impacted me, were just small things. My cousin saying, "Oh, she looks like Uncle Horace," and I'm a girl who has zero memories of her father. Zero. I'm 6 months old when he died, so yeah, zero memories. But to be told that I look like him, even though I know I'm a 50-50 split of my parents, like I promise you, if you put one picture of my mother on the right side of me and a picture of my father on the left side of me, you can divvy up my face into equal parts and pull it from each of them. But I do have a lot of his mannerisms and expressions and things like that. And to have that side of the family validate that just nurtured the little girl in me. I don't know how to explain it. And then there was a slight tinge of guilt that it meant so much for me for them to say those things. It was almost this feeling of like, am I betraying or, I don't know, neglecting the white side of my family, which I had just seen last month. Like we had a huge family reunion and like I grew up seeing them. I do look like them and we're shaped similar and things like that. And there's so much that I don't relate to with them. Yeah, there's just so much I don't relate to and they don't relate to with me. Our experiences are just different in this life. And I don't even know how to articulate how that makes me feel. There's, the civil rights movement was phenomenal in terms of the doors that it opened, the spaces that it freed up for us to speak into, tiptoe into, creep into, look into. And yet, we as a society were not ready for it. And in some ways, in some areas of this country, we still are not ready for it. I have said this before and I will continue to say it. You can legislate a lot of things, but acceptance is not one of them. Morality is not one of them. Compassion is not one of them. Respect and understanding definitely are not included in things that you can create into laws. And so what we did, what our ancestors did with the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the movement and all of that and the affirmative action, we demanded spaces for ourselves, for Black and brown people to be let into white spaces. And so understand that there's a difference. We did not integrate and create new spaces. That is not what we did. We demanded access for Black and brown people into white spaces. And there's a big difference between those things. And we put Black and brown students into white schools with white teachers who had no no frame of reference on how to relate to these students, on how to speak to them, how to understand them. And I think that that matters. I know that it matters for me. I know that it matters for me. And I know that that plays a part in how I view things and the balance that I always seem to be trying to find on this tightrope of life. You know, there have been people on my mother's side of the family who have unfriended me on Facebook, who don't talk to me anymore because of my stance when it comes to racial issues and social justice issues, because they simply don't get it. They don't get that they can love me and still be prejudiced. They don't get that they can love me and still support systems that are racist. They don't get it. And, you know, being around my aunts this weekend, like I literally got to lay on a bed, lay across the bed, right? Looking at pictures with both of my aunts who are in their 70s now, and hear stories about my dad and my family, things that I'd never known. And it mattered to me. And at the same time that it filled my heart with so much joy, there was a tinge of guilt that it made me so joyous. Because I felt a little bit like I'm betraying my mom and that side of my family. And there will be some people that go, I just don't get that. Well, you might not get it, but they are two different worlds to be in. And it is very challenging to hold space and to honor both of them for who they have made you be, especially because society and the world around you experiences you and sees you and filters you through one more than the other. I don't walk into spaces and especially into white spaces and get treated great. Like I don't get treated as white. Now, will I admit and own to the fact that there is a privilege that comes with lighter skin? Sure. I can also tell you that there is a detriment that comes with it. I can tell you that it is a weird space, and I believe I've spoken to this before, but it is the space of not being white enough for white people, not being black enough for black people, having black people make fun of you when you talk like they do, or because you don't say it black enough for them, especially when your mom is like mine and we practiced how we spoke and quote unquote sounded white at times, I guess. Yeah, it's different. And part of it makes me feel a little sad and also very grateful because I love all the parts of me. I love who being me and all the parts of me has made me become. So I love the fact that I have multiple lenses and filters through which I process the world around me. I love the fact that I can look at things like Juneteenth and have conversations with my mother and say, hey, Mom, that's not white people's holiday. That's not y'all's. You don't get it. If you want to come and be educated about it, cool. But you don't need to dress like us, act like us, like it's not yours. And I actually had that conversation with her in 2021. And she kind of looked puzzled at me, but I was like, no, it's not. And that's another conundrum that comes with it, right? Is that space of, at the end of the day, even saying this makes me feel kind of guilty, I guess. At the end of the day, I'm a black woman. Am I biracial? Absolutely. And the world that I live in the world that has been created for me to exist in. I exist in it as a Black woman, as a light-skinned, but not white-passing Black woman. And it is a space full of blessings and I don't know how to explain it. If you've never experienced it, and it's probably different too. Let me just say this. It is probably different that I am a biracial woman raised in a predominantly white community in the South. Because I don't know that biracial matters as much in the city because it's so diverse. And there's so many different shades and mixtures of cultures and religions and ethnicities and, all of that good stuff. I don't know that people in the city quite care as much. But I think being raised in the South in the 70s and 80s as a biracial girl definitely mattered to me. I can tell you that I grew up having white boys look at me physically, sexually, and desiring me, but not willing to bring me home as like, this is my girlfriend and date me publicly, right? I don't know that that would have been my same experience had I been raised somewhere else. But it definitely was. And so this weekend, going to New York and seeing my cousins and experiencing the way they do family, which is so different than the way my mother's side of the family does family, was an experience. It filled my heart with so much joy, gave me tinges of guilt, made me slightly sad for the decades that I'd missed with them. Not slightly sad, made me sad. But I'm not someone who wants to live in regret and the woulda, coulda, shouldas, right? So it is what it is, and it has been what it needed to be for me to be who I am at this moment in time. And so I will take it for exactly that. And make choices today that provide me with what I desire for the future. So what does that? That means 3 to 4 trips a year to New York, because I have aunties who are sick and who are elderly and who are telling me stories and sharing things about my father and my uncle who are both passed that I never knew. And through them, I get to create memories that I've never had. See sides of him that were never known to me, and sides of them, and sides of my grandmother, and what it means to tap into this unknown world, for me anyway, of what their world looks like as a Black woman. My aunt gave me a skirt before I left. Gorgeous, like long skirt, little matching bag. She said, I'm gonna give you something, kind of tap into the Black side of you. And so she gave me this skirt. I tried it on when I got home, and I love it, and I will definitely wear it and take pictures and that sort of thing. I wish the world was a little different. I wish the world had not thought that laws alone were enough. I wish that we had created something new instead of just making it illegal to keep Black and brown people out of white spaces. Do y'all see the difference in that? It's not enough. It's not enough to say, white people, you have to let them into this space, because then it's still not our space. And it is so much that way in lots of areas. You know, when you think about the world and the country at large, right? Financial institutions, for the most part, are still not our space. CEO, C-suite executives, still predominantly not our space, not nationwide, right? Legal spaces, still not our space, except the prison system, right? That's our space. But you get what I'm saying. My desire at this stage of my life is to explore all the parts of me, all the experiences of me, all the parts of my ancestors and their experiences, and how they might have shaped me, because you do carry that in your DNA a little bit. I think that's one thing that it helps to understand, is that it's not just me going through this, and it's not just me experiencing this. I do have part of the lessons and the experiences of my grandmother and great grandmothers in my DNA, and sitting with that and being okay with that, and finding this space of joy, not laced with guilt. And I do. Part of me has a little bit of guilt that I had so much fun. And it was so good to hug their necks and to hear their stories and to all of that. This will be my first family reunion with my father's side of the family in my entire life. And it's happening in just a few weeks. And part of me is so excited, and part of me is so nervous. There's just that tinge that says, what if they don't like me? What if I'm too whatever? What if I'm too white? What if I'm too... I don't even know what that means. What does that mean? I don't know. But I live in a world that has made me very aware of how I speak and how I carry myself, and what I do and don't do, and what is too white and what is too black, and what is not enough of either of those things. And it hurts the little girl in me a lot. And it gives the woman in me motivation to create something different. So for those of us who are part of the loving generation, those of us who grew up in spaces not meant for us, but mandatory that we be allowed into, hopefully this helps you know that you are not alone. And it is okay to feel what we feel and experience what we experience, with regards to both quote unquote sides of us. It's okay. We are who we are, and we're pretty damn amazing because we are the product of love. And at the end of the day, that has to mean something. That does mean something, because I truly believe in my heart that love wins. Love always wins. Thank you all for listening. I'll be back with another episode very soon. And we'll be back talking about things. We will be talking about politics. Yes, we will be talking about social justice and racial justice. And we will just be talking about humanity. What does it look like for us to bring about change, honor the space that we're in, and all be okay in the process? I believe that we must do that. While we want change, we must maintain our humanity and our compassion for one another if we want to build a world that is better for us now and our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren to come. And we can do it. We are doing it. I really, truly do believe that. So you guys have a good one. I appreciate you very much. Take care of you, and make sure that you are following, again, the Rantings of Dani, the Dani Cook, Real Dani Cook, all of those things. I'm here, and we are going to make this thing work together. All right? I'll see you all soon. Peace.